I started to say good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Performing Arts Equitable Payroll Fund informational webinar number something or other. We've been doing these almost every day for 2 weeks, so I've lost count of the number. But welcome. We are so happy to see you. Um, we're going to wait for just a second to get started so that we give everybody a chance to come on in. Sophie, you can go to the next slide. But while you're coming in, go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. Include your affiliation, your organization that you're with, excuse me, your land acknowledgement. If you want to share contact information for networking, you are certainly welcome to. It is not by any stretch recorded. Um, the event is being recorded. By first thing tomorrow, you will get an email that has a link to the recording, to the slide deck, and a bunch of fun resources. So do not feel like you have to take dictation and get this all down. One of the things that you will get a link to is the program guidelines, which is a very detailed document that includes every single page, every single question from the application and bunches of resources. Okay, the manners part. 61 years old and I still have no manners. Let's start by introducing myself. I am Terry Ball, and I am the Senior Programs Manager here at Californians for the Arts, and very excited to be here. We have some other members of the Performing Arts Equitable Payroll Fund CFTA team here with us. Beatrice Casagran, who in her other life is the artistic director of Ophelia's Jump in the greater Los Angeles area, is here, and she will be manning the Q&A. She will be responding to all of your questions in the Q&A, which makes a natural transition to please put all of your questions into the Q&A, not in the chat. We do a transcript of this afterwards, and it's much easier if all the questions are there. It's also much easier for Beatrice to keep up with all the questions if everything's there. If you forget and put something in the chat, Martha will remind you to move it to the Q&A, which that's a natural, to introduce Martha Dimson, who is another part of our team, who will be manning the chat. In her other life, she is on the board of TIPSCA, the theater producers of Southern California, and also involved with Open Fist in Los Angeles. The final member of our team with us here today is the fabulous Sophie Lynn, who in her other life is a wonderful young lighting designer. And she is manning the slides and our technical elements today. Okay, next. This is our team from Californians for the Arts. Californians for the Arts is actually two separate but related organizations. Californians for the Arts is the first nonprofit, and we are your arts advocacy service organization for the state, doing things like lots of educational webinars and information and advocacy work for programs like this. Our sister organization, California Arts Advocate, is the comprehensive actual lobbying organization that does more of the direct lobbying. All right, next. As I've mentioned, questions are welcome at all times. Beatrice will be manning that. She will answer your questions in the Q&A as we go along. There are also set times throughout that we will stop for her to review the questions. There's a lot of information I'm going to throw at you. And so we try to break it up a little and do the Q&A. All right, next. We've also put together a document of all of the links, so you don't have to feel like you're madly copying links. And we're trying not to make the chat too crazy. So Martha is going to put a link in, she probably already has, and you can take that link, and all of the links that we're sharing, all of the resources that we talk about, and also the link to where you apply and everything else is in that document. Okay, next. So in that document also there are a few handy dandy Zoom tips. The first one, and those are highlighted here, but again, they're also in the document if you want to utilize them. Um, the first is you can turn on the closed captioning down at the bottom of your screen if that is useful for you. Um, Next, also a reminder that your Zoom screen is unique to you. And so if you want to rearrange things so it works better for you, you are welcome to do that because that does not impact anybody else. And there's some tips here for how to do that. Next. Our wonderful community partners. One of our primary goals in working on this program is to make sure every organization in the state that is potentially eligible is aware of the program and has the opportunity to apply. This is honestly for two reasons. One, obviously, we want everyone who can possibly take advantage of these funds to have that opportunity. Also, currently, these funds are a one-year program. The only way it's going to be an ongoing program is through advocacy. And the response to the program, the signups and having this program be fully subscribed is one of our first and most powerful acts of advocacy to get additional funding for the future. So we have partnered with this fabulous group of our friends from around the state. It's a combination of organizations that have geographical reach as well as genre reach to help us spread the word, to help us be additional points of contact, so that, getting an email from your friends at ACSO might be more impactful for you and rise more quickly to the flood of emails than one from Californians for the Arts. One of the things that we're doing with all of these organizations is hosting webinars. Next. This is what's left of our webinar schedule. Next week, we do have a webinar that will be simulcast in Spanish. So if you have any friends or colleagues for whom that would be useful, please, you can share that with them. And we have just added one additional on March 4th for those who are coming a little bit later to the party. Which brings us next to today's webinar, where we are co-hosting with our fabulous friends from the Association of California Symphony Orchestras. And Sarah Weber is here with us from ACSO. So Sarah, introduce yourselves. Tell us about ACSO.
Hello, good afternoon. Um, it's so good to see all of you. Many of you on this webinar are members of ACSO, and I'm thrilled to see you here today. And many of you, I know of your organizations, and I'm so glad you heard the news. Can I just say before I say anything about ACSO, I am so happy that we are at this moment today. ACSO has been working with this coalition of leaders for the last year plus on this bill, on this legislation, on this funding, on keeping the funding once we got it, on the implementation of this program. And I'm just so thrilled that finally we're to this day. And I just want to give a huge uh, shout out of thanks to California for the Arts and the theater producers of Southern California for leading the charge. And we've been so honored to be part of the coalition. ACSO is a professional membership association, trade association for orchestras and all music organizations, really. We work with music festivals, choral groups, youth orchestras, university ensembles, as well as professional and community orchestras. So if you are a music organization or any kind of ensemble, even though our name says orchestra, we are happy to have you in our membership network. We have individual members, we have organizational members. If you're not a member of ACSO and you're interested in being part of our music community, we welcome you with open arms. I'm gonna throw our website into the chat just so if you want to learn more about us or our membership. But really, what we do is advocacy, professional development, capacity building, creating community and network amongst people who work for orchestras and music organizations. Mostly the administrative side, but definitely the artistic and musicians themselves and artists themselves. Our goal is really to help music organizations and orchestras thrive. We want to see the art form continue on, well into the future. And so we want to help provide you the resources and information you need to run your organizations the best that you can. We've been around for over 50 years. We are based in LA, but we serve the entire statewide community, as well as actually some organizations in Nevada and Arizona, because turns out there are very, very few states that have a professional orchestra association representing their music community. California is one of a handful, and we are the largest and longest and most professionally run in terms of like budget size and staff. So um, California's, I think, lucky and unique to have all of these advocates and organizations, service organizations looking out for our arts community. So I'm so thrilled to be here. I'm so happy to have this partnership. I'm so happy that this grant program exists. Thank you for being here. And I hope every single one of you who are eligible applies for this grant when it opens in a few weeks. I think that's all I want to say. I'm ready to be quiet now. So back to you, California for the Arts.
Continue. Um, we like to take a moment here to celebrate the success. Sarah did a great job, so I'm not going to go into detail I normally do, but it is important to me to say thank you to the likes of Sarah and Tipska and Equity and everyone else and every one of you individually who met with your legislators and sent letters. The only reason we are here is because of advocacy. So it's important to me to take a moment, celebrate the advocacy success, and acknowledge that advocacy does in fact work, and it's the only thing that got us here today. Okay, next, let's move on. Sorry. Okay, so what is the Performing Arts Equitable Payroll Fund? The Performing Arts Equitable Payroll Fund was created to support small nonprofit performing arts organizations, those with revenues under $2 million, in hiring and retaining employees. The fund reimburses a portion of payroll costs on a quarterly basis. The program's goal is to restore resilience and build sustainability in the sector through an investment in creative jobs. It is administered by the Office of the Small Business Advocate, lovingly referred to as Cal OSBA, and managed by Californians for the Arts. So this is not a California for the Arts funded program. These are tax dollars funded through the state and administered. The final authority on the program is Cal OSBA. We are simply here to help manage the process. We are here to partner with Cal OSBA as a conduit to the industry to help manage the program, design the program based on the legislation, but recognizing that ours is a unique industry, and Cal OSBA wanted partners to work with to make the communication and the process as user-friendly as possible. One of the important tidbits, the application portal opens on March 10th, 2025 at 9 a.m. And the applications will be reviewed in the order they are received. So it is important to take this time to prepare, get your application ready, and be ready to submit on March 10th. All right, next. Okay, so who can apply? The first is 501c3 organizations and also fiscally sponsored organizations, as long as you're a Model C fiscal sponsor agreement. For the fiscal sponsor organizations, if you are the fiscal sponsor and you also fit the eligibility criteria for the program, you are welcome to apply for your own organization as well as submit up to 10 applications for fiscally sponsored organizations. Next, the eligibility criteria. This is a grant that is based very much on specific eligibility criteria, information that is submitted, documents that are submitted. This is not an evaluation of the quality of your organization. There is not a narrative component. This is very much you are or you are not. So let's go through those. As we just mentioned, that you're either a 501c3 or a Model C fiscally sponsored organization. It's very important that you are producing or presenting performing arts that are open to the public and primarily have adult paid performers. That you are hiring and paying your workers as employees. So that's W-2 employees, not independent contractors. That you are in compliance with California labor laws, including those around the classification of employees. Um, that you are in compliance with California sexual harassment training requirements. There's a link here, also in the document, to a state site that gives you information on what those California sexual harassment training requirements are, because they do vary a little bit for organizations depending on size, and also there are different requirements for temporary employees like your performers and permanent employees. So go there, study up on it, and figure out whether or not you are in compliance. You do not have to have been in compliance in the past. You just need to be in compliance before you submit your application, so that when you submit, you can attest that you are in compliance. You will not be required to provide all of the certificates of your employees. There is no specific certificate for you as an organization. You just need to make sure that you are in compliance. You also have to have a written DEI policy and a written anti-harassment policy in place. And you'll be asked to provide the date those were put in place and also when they were last updated. We'll go over that in some more detail later. You have to have a mission statement. You have to be certified as in good standing by the California Secretary of State. The link here is to take you to the California Secretary of State website, where you can check your status, where you can download this certificate. This is an actual certificate that Secretary of State does. It needs to be less than 30 days old. When you submit it, you will upload it with your application. There'll be a question there. You need the actual certificate, not a screenshot of the site showing your status. Don't take a picture with your phone. You need to download as a PDF the actual certificate, and you'll be asked to upload it. You need to be able to provide your 990s for the last 3 filed tax years. For those of you that file a 990N, which does not have any financial information on it, you will instead file Form CTTR1, which is the form you file annually with the state. So these are the last 3 filed tax years. This is not 2024, which we realize for most people is not due yet even. And they need to be 3 of the last 5 years. So if for some reason, even 2023, you have a special circumstance, you've got an extension or something, you haven't filed 2023 yet, it's fine. It can be 20, 21, and 22. Along with your 990s, and this is included later, you're also going to provide for those same years your more detailed either statement of activity or profit and loss, whichever you use, because that will give us a little bit more detail than is on the 990. You have to have adjusted average annual revenue under $2 million, which we'll talk in a minute about how that is calculated. And you have to not fall under there's a specific list of ineligible organizations that we're about to go over, and you can't be any of those. Beatrice, were you starting to say something?
No,
okay.
Sorry.
All right.
I have to go poker face sometimes.
That's all right. Totally good. We're getting back in the flow here.
I'm sitting here going
Zoom craziness. I know. Listen, we're in at least number 15 of these, and that's the first internet problem we've had. So I suppose I should count us lucky. Okay, Sophie, let's go to the next. All right, the ineligible organizations. There is this list of very specific organizations. One that always seems to cause people questions is nonprofit organizations that raise money for a single arts organization. This is not an issue of if you only raise money for your organization. This is a third-party organization, like, for example, a booster club, where their only point of being in existence is that they are raising money for a specific arts organization. It's a little strange to me that this would be included because it wouldn't meet any of the other criteria anyway, but it's very specifically in here. If you're a booster club, you're not going to be eligible. There is always a lot of question, and I'm going to be very honest, concern and unhappiness about the fact of the final one listed here, youth performing arts groups, including but not limited to youth symphonies, choirs, and theater groups. This is not a statement against any of those organizations. We all agree they're extremely important. This program is a grant program that is set up specifically through legislation. And in order to pass legislation, there are sometimes compromises that have to be made. And with a brand new program, and this program is a first of its kind in the state of California, and as far as we know, in the country. And there's always a lot of concern with new programs. And there was a lot of concern in getting this passed that we weren't creating too giant of a pool. And so it is unfortunate. I realize it's extremely disappointing for the heads of youth organizations, but it is what it is for right now. And one of our hopes is that the program is a big success, that we have a huge response, that the legislature then sees the importance of this funding, and in advocacy to continue the funding, we can also continue to try to widen the pool of who is eligible. Okay, so next. So this is where we'll take our first breather. Beatrice, do you have any questions?
No, we're good. And you've addressed the youth symphony issue, which did come up, youth organizations. I think we're good right now.
Okay, onward. So how does this whole thing work? Sunshine, if you can go ahead and please put your question into the Q&A, that would be really helpful. All right, so how does this work? This is all set up as a reimbursement of payroll expenses. And it's a percentage of your payroll expenses. And it's set up so that the smallest organizations receive the largest percentage of reimbursement. So we're going to go through in a minute what expenses are reimbursable if you are deemed to be eligible. But first we want to look at how do we come up with this adjusted annual gross revenue so that you know what percentage of reimbursement you would be eligible for. The organizations that are under $250,000, it's 80% of the eligible payroll expenses that would be reimbursable, up to the largest organizations, the $1.75 million to $2 million tier, they are eligible for 20% of their payroll expenses. So how do we calculate this adjusted gross revenue? Those three final 990s that you're going to include, we're going to take the gross revenue from those. You're going to have a lovely handy dandy table that Sophie designed for you. And you're going to enter your gross revenue off that, off the 990 for the 3 years, 3 different rows. Then, because we understand, the legislature, when it was passed, understand that there are certain revenue streams that can happen that can inflate your revenue so it looks like your actual operating revenue is more than it is. Not all sources of revenue are allowable to be excluded, but there are 3 very specific types of revenue that can be excluded from your revenue. The first of those is revenue earmarked by the grantor or donor solely for capital expenditures. So that you have to be able to provide documentation that the grantor / donor actually designated this money for capital expenditures, not endowments, not reserve funds, but specifically for capital expenditures. The second category that can be excluded is any pass-through funds that you collected for the benefit of another organization. For example, if you have fiscal sponsees, and you have money that comes through that's not part of your operating budget that you're only collecting, that there's a way to exclude. The final one, which is slightly confusing, the wording is funds received pursuant to section 8753.6, which is actually a subcategory of funds from the California Arts Council. This is not all the regular public grant programs through the California Arts Council. This isn't the general operating. This isn't Creative Corps, or if you get money from cultural districts or anything like that. This is very specifically funds that you have been granted from either the Keep Arts in Schools Fund or the Arts License Plates Fund. So you would have to have documentation that you have money from one of these two funds. And the table will ask you first for the revenue, then it will give you the opportunity to enter these three things that you might exclude. Then it's going to do the math for you. It will total up the 3 lines for the 3 different years and then calculate your average. So that then you can come back to the table and say, oh, okay, we fall between 450,000, 650,000. So our percentage of reimbursement will be 70%. Next. Okay, so here's the handy dandy table. This is available. It will be in the links. You can download it now. You can start filling it in. You do not fill it in online. You have to, when you follow the link, download it to your computer, complete it, and then have it ready to be uploaded in the application. Next. All right, the term of this grant is 1 year with reimbursements for 4 quarters. We're going to talk about those reimbursements in a minute, but first I like to set the stage. The grant amount is set based on the total that you provide to us for 2 of these quarters in actual expenses and 2 in projected expenses. The eligible quarters are Q3 and Q4 of 2024 and Q1 and Q2 of 2025. These are calendar year quarters, regardless of how it regardless of if you are on a fiscal year, these are the actual calendar year quarters that you're going to go with for all of the payroll expenses. Your income is based on your 990s, so that is ultimately a fiscal year, but your payroll calculations are all based on calendar years. Okay. While the grant amount will be based on the actual expenses and the projected expenses, your actual reimbursement for those projected expenses will be what your actual expenses are. And the projections that you make are set up so that that's the maximum. So your grant will be basically a guaranteed not to exceed. So if your actual expenses when it comes to Q1 and Q2 of 2025 are less than what you project, what you receive will be that less than amount. If your actual expenses are more than the projected amount, then you will still be maxed out at your projected amount. Okay, next, we're going to talk about all of that. So what actually is reimbursable? The payroll expenses, including your employee wages. Now again, these are W-2 employee wages. If you have independent contractors, even independent contractors that you are legally and correctly paying as independent contractors, those expenses are still not eligible. This is specifically to reimburse funds for employees. The second category is workers' comp expenses. Those are your annual premiums that you pay. The next thing is pension, retirement, health plan that you pay for your employees, and those are reimbursable. And finally, the payroll and paymaster fees that you pay to have payroll processed. This includes if you pay for something like Gusto, if you have the add-on in QuickBooks, so you process payroll internally. Your base QuickBooks wouldn't be reimbursable, but the portion that you pay extra to be able to process payroll would be. There are two important categories of things that are not reimbursable. Um, the first one is unemployment insurance, which is something you as an employer pay separately. That cannot be included and is not reimbursable. And payroll taxes, both federal and state payroll taxes, including the taxes that are withheld from people's paychecks. So there's going to be a line on the form that you fill out that asks for taxes withheld because those are also not reimbursable, even though they come out of the wages. The reimbursements are capped at $10,000 per employee per quarter. If your expenses are greater than that, you're still capped at 10,000. And then what your reimbursement is the percentage of that. So if you fall into that smallest group under 250,000, you are going to be eligible for an 80% reimbursement of the 10,000 per employee per quarter. It's a lot of information, I realize. Next. Okay, so this gives us more detail. There is again a lovely form that's going to ask you questions. You're going to fill out 4 different spreadsheets, one for each of these 4 quarters. Let's talk first about the actual expenses. On the line, you're going to have one line for each employee. These expenses can't be grouped together because again, it's capped at 10,000 per employee per quarter. So if you group it all together, you're going to get one lump of 10,000. You're going to start with the employee's name. Then it's going to ask for your hourly wage. The hourly wage is not part of this calculation. It is here because one of the requirements of the program, the bill, is that you pay at least minimum wage. So we need to know what you're paying this person to qualify, to satisfy that requirement. If you pay people multiple wages, somebody is both an electrician and you're a prima ballerina, very Renaissance person, but you pay them one rate to be a ballerina and one rate to be an electrician, or one rate for rehearsals and another rate for performance, you're going to look at what was the lowest hourly rate you paid this person during this quarter. And that's what you're going to enter here. Also, if you have people who are paid a salary instead of hourly, you're going to calculate what their hourly wage is. Hopefully they don't have hourly wage. Okay, so that first one, don't be confused and concerned that your hourly wage you feel like isn't going to calculate your gross wages because we're not going to ask the hours. So we're not doing that calculation. We realize it would be confusing because people make all kinds of different rates, including, just overtime and double time and stuff. So don't be thrown off by that. The next set of numbers the form is going to calculate with. The first is gross wages. What was the gross wages you paid this particular employee during this particular quarter? Then what amounts of money did you as an employer spend on this particular employee for health plans, retirement plan, etc.? The next is your payroll processing expenses and your workers' comp expenses. Now, I realize you may not have a statement that says, here's my workers' comp, here's what I paid for this person on the quarter. In part because a lot of these things we pay as a premium first, and then it's a year and a half before you have the audit that breaks it down. So you may have to do calculations and say, my workers' comp for the year was $5,000. And so I'm going to calculate what did I spend in this quarter and then break it down, what did I spend per employee? Now, some of you may work with a paymaster, so you may just pay a flat 5% workers' comp for everybody, so then you'll know easily. But if that's not your situation, then you will do those calculations. You're going to be asked later to provide documentation, and you're just going to include in that documentation that you provide a note of how you calculated the figures that you have used to break the workers' comp down by employee. The final column that's going to ask you is the taxes that were withheld. So you're going to go to your payroll journals, and it's going to show you the taxes that were withheld. This is not the employer tax liability, but the taxes that were withheld from the employee's wages for that quarter. You're going to enter that. And then the form is going to do the math for you. Remembering that it's going to be maxed out at $10,000, even if you paid this person $20,000 in the quarter. Lucky them, but your reimbursement is still maxed at $10,000, and it's the percentage of that $10,000. Okay, next. So before we go next, I forgot. So you're going to have those first 2 quarters that are your actual expenses, and then you're going to have the 2 spreadsheets that are your projected expenses, where you do all these same, sorry about this, Sophie, all these same calculations, but you're looking forward to Q1 and Q2 of 2025. So in this case, you might not have the actual name, but we still need the position. So instead of Beatrice Casagran, you're going to say prima ballerina or violinist number 4, scene designer 3, and then do all of the rest. You're going to still do the hourly wage, that you plan to pay them, and do the rest of the projections across the board. Okay, next. Now we go to questions. Beatrice, what you got?
We actually just have one that I think I should probably address. If we have a mix of W-2 and 1099 volunteers, are we eligible to apply? The answer to that is you should be if you are in compliance with California labor laws. So the one thing is eligibility, and then you also have to be able to comply that you are paying people correctly, that you're not misclassifying people. And that will be something that will be required. So musicians especially have a variety of waivers and things that are applicable. If you are paying musicians correctly, and some of them are 1099s, and that's correct, then you should be eligible under the scenario you've posed. It does not matter that you have both, as long as you're in compliance with the law. Does that make sense? Anything else to add, ladies?
I don't think so. I think
okay,
you're good.
Good.
Yeah.
Other than that, we are good. And it doesn't, you just mentioned it, Terry, and I think people had been asking. I just want to reiterate, if you don't have employees right now, but you're going to get some, yes, you can apply, and you will estimate with your application what positions you are going to hire or have hired, and who you're going to pay. And then when you submit for reimbursement for Q1 or Q2 later on, you will fill in your actuals. So it does not make you ineligible that you have not had employees in the past. In fact, one of the things that some of the people who worked on this statute were hoping was that you would, in fact, then hire W-2 employees, in knowing that you could get reimbursed for them. So, and we're good.
Okay. And the important thing to remember there is that you won't actually get those funds until it's still a reimbursement. You're going to give the projection right now, but you don't get the process of money until after those quarters actually happen. But yes, we do absolutely encourage you to move into using employees correctly and apply in that situation. Next. Okay, so now we're going to talk through the process. As we said, we are managing this process for Cal OSBA, so both parties are going to be involved in the review and processing of the application. March 10th, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. The application portal is going to open, and you can submit your applications along with your documentation. Californians for the Arts, the TIPSCA team, not the TIPSCA team, I'm sorry. Beatrice has taken to calling this the PP plan. And so the PP
I can't believe you told people that.
The PP fund. The PP fund. It rolls off the tongue better than so the PP funds team will review the applications. We will check all of the documents, check all of the answers. If there are any problems with your documents, you know, the PDF is unlegible, you've accidentally uploaded the same thing twice, we will contact you and say we need, you know, X, Y, and Z fixed. As we mentioned, these are processed on a first come, first served basis. So it behooves you to make sure you don't make those kinds of mistakes. Do everything you can. What you want is for this to slide through as quickly as possible, because if we have to reach out to you and say, oh, we need a new this or that, that's going to impact your place in line. So take this time now, get your stuff together, double check your documents, and so that you can just move right on through. So once we have completed the review, we will then pass things on to Cal OSBA, who will make the final decisions, staying in that order. We will then communicate back to you and let you know either that you were deemed to be ineligible and here's why, or yay, you were approved and here's your grant agreement, sign your grant agreement, get it back to us as quickly as possible, and then Cal OSBA can begin processing your reimbursement for those first 2 quarters where you provided that documentation with your application. Now, Cal OSBA is a giant state organization. Think of this like dealing with the CAC. It is going to be 45 to 90 days from when you get that grant agreement back to us before your check is processed. The thing that you can control in this process is your portions of it. So make sure your application is as clean as possible so it moves through slowly. Watch your email so that if there are issues or we are contacting you to say, hooray, sign your grant agreement, so you get those emails immediately, sign that agreement and get it back to us. You can't control Cal OSBA, but you can control your portion of it. After the initial approval, then at the end of Q1 of 2025, there will be a report that you will submit with your actual expenses now for that first quarter and the documentation for that quarter's expenses. Once that's received and approved through CFTA, then it will go to Cal OSBA and then checks will be processed. Then we go forward to the end of Q2. So now we're talking about roughly the month of July. Again, the same process. You're going to get a report. You're going to submit your payroll, your actual expenses now, as compared to the projections that you provided, the documentation that supports those, and it will be processed, the final rounds of checks. And then in the fall, there will be a final report that is due. Again, this is not going to be a big narrative report. It may ask for a success story, but this is going to be about numbers. You know, how many jobs were you able to retain? How many jobs did you create, etc. Okay, next. So, all right. So this just kind of breaks down that process that we just talked through timeline-wise. I've not figured out a graceful way to have both the words individual, so you get both. The thing to remember once again is these are all calendar year quarters, regardless of if you're on a fiscal year. This we're talking calendar years. The other thing to remember again is that for those projected quarters, your actual reimbursement will be on your actual expenses, and it will be capped by the amount of your projections. Next. Okay, the GoSmart portal itself. The actual applications are being processed through a portal called GoSmart that is run by WestStaff. It has a new name now. I keep forgetting WestStaff has a new name. But WestStaff is a multi-state arts organization. And this is a portal that they use that we are adapting for our grant management. Next, the portal itself is up now. You can go, you can set up your account. We're going to go over how to do that. You cannot see the application yet. You cannot submit the application yet. But we encourage you to go to the portal, to set up your account, to go to the tips page and watch the little tutorial videos, learn how to be comfortable moving around in the portal. So that's something that you're already done and comfortable with on March 10th. Once you get to the actual application, you're going to remember that either you're looking for the 501c3 application or you're looking for the fiscal sponsor application. Your fiscal sponsor is the one who will actually be filling out the application, not the fiscally sponsored. When you fill out the actual application, do not have to do it all in one setting. If something happens and you need to stop, to do that and come back. You can also jump around in order if you like. There's a navigation bar on the side. And if you're very excited about one particular section and you want to jump there and do it first, you are welcome to do that. Next. So let's talk about setting up your account in the portal. The link to get to the GoSmart portal is included in your links document. You're going to go there. If you already have used the GoSmart portal for a different grant process, you need to set up a new account for this particular process. And what you want to set up is an organization account. Our grant opportunity is only open to organizations, not individuals. So if you create an individual account, when you come back to apply, you're not going to be able to apply for this particular grant. The information that you use to set up your account is part of your application. So this information that you're going to be asked for here, you're not going to have to repeat again when you start the application. It will feed in. These are the things that you need. When you're setting up the account, this is when you're going to want to address this question of a primary contact and your authorized signer. You can have this be two different people, or it can be one person. It all depends on what is best for your organization. The authorized signer, which is the person that has to sign your certificate of compliance when you submit, and this is also the person who will ultimately need to sign your grant agreement. That has to be a legal signatory for your organization, which is someone that is listed as an officer and signer on your statement of information. And when you go to the Secretary of State website to check your status, you can look at your statement of information, make sure it's up to date, make sure those people listed there are still your officers. So the authorized signer needs to be one of those people. For some organizations, that might be your executive director, and that's totally fine. For other organizations, that might be, say, your board treasurer or one of your board officers who might not be as involved in your day-to-day operation and might not be as keen to watching their emails for your organization's information. In that case, you would probably benefit from selecting a different primary contact. You want your primary contact to be the person that watches their email with a pathological closeness, so that any email that comes in regarding this grant gets dealt with immediately. And now is when you want that, because you want your primary contact to set up the account. It does not ultimately matter who physically fills out the application. You want the primary contact to be somebody that is knowledgeable about the organization and that watches their email, that we can get a hold of, ask questions to, etc. The authorized signer, as I said, has to be someone who has that legal capability. There's a list of things here that you will need to set up your account. This is part of the physical GoSmart portal. The application itself we designed, but this part comes as a finished package. And so, for example, you will see it's going to ask you for your state house district. This portal covers multiple states. We obviously here have the state assembly district. You can make that transition, but that's why it says house there. There is a place here to look up your legislator. One of the requirements we have for a state grant is we have to be able to report back which districts in both the Assembly and the Senate were impacted by this grant. So you will select, this could be your business address, it could be the address of your primary venue, it could be the address of your artistic director. You decide the district that best represents where the impact is felt from your organization. There is no wrong answer here, but you do have to provide an answer of the Assembly district and the Senate district, and you can look those up from the handy dandy link there. Next. Okay, there are two separate applications. You're not, everybody goes the same place to set up your account. When you come back on March 3rd and log in to complete the application, you're going to see two different applications. And you're going to select either the 501c3 or the fiscally sponsored. We are not going to go over here today every single question in the application. That is, however, included in the program guidelines. There is one set that goes step by step through everything in the 501c3 application, and a separate one that does that for the fiscally sponsored application. Go through it. For the fiscally sponsored application, you're going to want to pay close attention. Again, your fiscal sponsor is the actual grantee. So they are the one that has the authorized signer. They are the one that will sign your grant agreement. There will be documentation asked for, some specifically about the fiscal sponsor, some about the sponsored organization. So read the questions carefully. Fiscal sponsors, as I mentioned before, you can submit for up to 10 fiscally sponsored organizations. You will have to do a separate application for everyone. You can use the same account, but you have to fill out a unique application for each of your fiscal sponsees. And that means you will have to repeat your information. You can't put everybody into one application. Sorry. Okay, next. All right, now we're going to walk through some of the big parts of the application. The first is organizational information. Again, a lot of your organizational information was already picked up in the account setup. This is some additional factors. You will find as we go through, again, this is all about information. This legislation was very prescriptive, very specific. And there are some questions that you're going to say, why? But it is a combination of things like the primary performance venue size that is specifically noted in the legislation as information we're supposed to collect. There are other things that as part of our responsibility to report to the state, because these are state funds, that's the source of some of the questions. Many of these questions, like the size of your primary performance venue, you are not evaluated based on the answer, but you are not eligible if you don't answer. So we don't care ultimately what the size of your primary performance venue is. We only care that you tell it. So there's not preference placed on small venues or large venues. We just need to be able to report the variant of who was supported. So you're going to decide if you perform in multiple venues, decide which one is your definition of your primary, and tell us the capacity for that venue. Here is where you're going to enter that authorized signer. If it's the same person as your primary contact that you set up the account under, that's totally fine. It's a different person. Either way, you're going to fill it in here. You're going to list your county, your mailing address in case it's different from your business address, and if you have a DBA. Next. Now we start into the documents. This grant is all about documents. All of the preparation of documents, you can start now, have it done, have it checked, and have it sitting there on your computer waiting, so you aren't doing anything on March 10th, but a lot of uploading. All right, so again, this list is slightly different for fiscal sponsors. So be sure that you check that list, but it's the same basic components. There's just some things with the fiscal sponsor you're going to provide for both the fiscal sponsor and the sponsee, and in other cases, it's different. All right, so your Internal Revenue Service 501c3 determination letter, you're going to want a PDF of that. You're going to want a PDF of your articles of incorporation, including any amendments. That fancy dancy certificate from the Secretary of State under status, you're going to want that. You're going to want the organization's last 3 file 990s along with the same year statement of activity or profit and loss statement. Again, for those of you who are filing the 990 in instead of a 990, you're going to provide the CTTR1 that you file with the state. You're going to upload your organization DEI policy, including the dates when the policy was adopted and when it was updated, and the same for your harassment policy. These do not have to have been adopted sometime in the past. You are not evaluated on the quality of your DEI or anti-harassment policy. You just have to provide one. This can be something that is in your employee handbook, but you just need to provide it. You need to include the date it was adopted and if it has been adopted, updated. I know there is some concern because of all of the state and the federal activity right now around DEI statements. This is specifically written into the legislation. As we talked about, this program is based on legislation. In order to take this requirement out or change this requirement, it would mean we have to pass new legislation, which would mean stopping the program and potentially losing the funding, etc. At this point, this requirement is not going to change. So we just want everybody to know and understand that. Next. So now that you've provided documents to prove the validity of your organization, now you're going to help us, you can help establish your eligibility as a organization that produces or presents performing arts available to the public and advertised to the public. So the way you're going to do that is you're going to select 3 productions that have taken place in the last 5 years. And for each of those productions, you're going to submit 3 pieces of evidence. The years have to be 3 different years, so you can't pick 3 things from 2024. 3 productions, 3 different years within the last 5 years. Unfortunately, brand new organizations are not eligible for this grant because you do have to have 3 years of 990s. So if you have not been around for that long, again, we're sorry, but that is one of the basic parameters is you have to have at least these 3 years of 990s and of production. So there's 6 different kinds of documents, categories that you can select from. For each show you're submitting, you're going to submit 3 documents. Reviews is something that has caused a lot of concern for people because we know it can be difficult to get a review. You do not have to submit a review. It's one of the things you can select from. You can also select a box office report. You can select social media posts and internet web listings, advertising the production. There's 6 very different things. It says playbill for the production. That just means a program. Whatever your program is, it certainly doesn't have to be playbill brand. Whatever you call your program, the thing that says what's going to happen, who's doing the stops, that's a program. That's what meets the playbill. So you're going to pick your 3 things. For example, in 2021, you did Angels in America. So you're going to give us in 3 separate PDFs, a box office report, evidence of paid advertisement, and a review. Then you're going to go to a separate year, 2023. You did The Shop. You're going to give us evidence of a paid advertisement, a review, and a playbill. Then for your 3rd year, you did Helvetica. And you're going to provide 3 different PDFs, 1 that's a box office, 1 social media post, and 1 email campaign posts. These are just random examples. You do not have to do these 3 specific sets. You're going to pick a production, and you're going to pick 3 things from the list of 6. You do have to pick 3 different things. So you couldn't say, here's our Angels in America from 2021, and here are 3 different reviews. They do have to be one each of, from 3 of the 6 different categories. These are all PDFs. They each have to be maxed at 10 megabytes. So you are ultimately submitting 9 documents for this. You can prepare all of these now. Next. Okay, continuing into application instructions. For the income section, we've really talked about this. It's just included here again with, you're going to fill out your table. There's one table. There's one table for 501c3s. There's a separate table for fiscal sponsors. In this, the income information, we are talking about the sponsee, not the sponsor. And we've talked about how to calculate these years, match the years of the 990s and the financial statements that you have provided. These forms are available now. Download them. You can complete them and have them waiting. Next. To the payroll expense section. Again, 4 different spreadsheets. They are available now. There is a spreadsheet for each quarter. It has about 30 lines on it, as I recall. If you have 60 employees to report for Q3 of 2024, then you're going to take that form and fill it out twice. Make 2 different copies. There will be the option in the application to upload 2 copies. You can combine them into one PDF if you want, or you can, keep them separate. But you're just going to fill out multiple copies of that same spreadsheet. You do need to use the actual spreadsheet and not make up your own spreadsheet because it is all set up to do the math and the calculations. Okay, next. Then you're going to have your 2 other spreadsheets that are about your projected. I want to talk a little bit more about this projected expenses thing. The reason that we're putting a grant amount on them, even though part of this is projected, is our anticipation is we do not have enough money to fund everyone in the state who might be eligible. And we do, the legislation, we specifically have to give a grant for a year. So as we're going through and reviewing applications, we have to be able to set an amount for the grants. Even though we know ultimately you might get a little bit less, but we need to be able to know how many grants we can approve up front, because we don't want anyone to get a grant and then us be in a situation of, ooh, sorry, we gave away more money than we thought. We told you you could get a grant, but you can't. So the grant amount is set on those projections. Then the amount you actually get could be less if your payroll expenses were not what you anticipated. So we encourage you to be very careful in looking at these projections. We certainly encourage you not to underestimate. We also ask that you not wildly overestimate, because all that's going to do is lock up funds that can't go to someone else until later. You're not going to actually get more money because the money you get is based on those actual projections. So don't say, oh, I think I'm going to spend $50,000, but let me put in $100,000 just in case. Because also, if your projections are wildly different, that's going to probably cause a question and delay your process. Now, if you had nothing in Q3 and Q4, and you only have projections in Q1, obviously they're going to be much higher. I know this is a little awkward and weird. Again, it is all part of this process of how do we process this forward. When we are processing applications, because of this situation and the fact that we know there may be funds that become available, we will process applications until, based on the grant amounts, we are out of funds. Then we will continue to process applications and create a wait list. When you are approved, you will be told you're in the approved or you're on the wait list. If once we begin processing reimbursements in spring, if there are funds left over because people did overestimate their projections, then we will go back to the wait list again in the order that it was approved and bring other people in and process their reimbursements. The other thing that the wait list does, quite frankly, is it helps us make the advocacy of the need for the program. Okay, next. In addition to the numbers, and we've talked a lot about the numbers, you're also for Q3 and Q4, and later down the line for Q1 and Q2, but for Q and 3-4, you're going to have to provide documentation for all of the numbers you provide us. For many of you, the documentation for wages is very simple. It's your quarterly statement that you send to the state that lists every employee you paid during the quarter, the total wages, the taxes that were held. It can also be a quarterly payroll register from your payroll service. I know for those of you who use a paymaster as your employer of record, they sometimes do the tax wage reports as a pool with all of their employees, not just yours. So you're going to work with them to have them provide to you a statement that shows everyone they paid for you in the quarter, the gross wages for that person, and the tax withholding for that person. So you can provide that documentation. The workers' comp, health pension, et cetera, and the payroll and paymaster. We talked about before, you're going to provide us evidence that you paid these things. If you have needed to do calculations, which you certainly will, to go from the gross amount you paid to the amount that you are submitting for this specific person or for each specific person. Just include with your documentation in the same PDF a note that says, here's how you're going to show your math. We're back to geometry. Here's how I got to the calculations that I put for each particular person. You don't have to say it 57 times, but you know what I'm saying. And the same is true with your other expenses. Those are more likely to be broken down by a specific person. You probably know what you're paying for health insurance or retirement for each individual. But for anything that's grouped together where you have to do calculation, just show your work, include it in your documentation. Q3 and Q4 submitted with the application. Q1 and Q2 will be prepared down the line when you submit those numbers. Next. Questions? Beatrice, we've thrown a tremendous amount of information out there.
I'm finding it interesting, the different kinds of questions we're getting. I am in my mind doing a whole analysis of the difference between musicians and actors. It's fun. You guys are analytical. It's kind of cool. No, I'm getting lots of stuff about like what constitutes some of these things that people can submit to show that you were open to the public. And that's what these submissions are for, you guys, where you have these 6 different documents. It goes to the statutory requirement that you be producing productions that are open and advertised to the public. So that's all we mean. So if website listings, you can go back and search a production. I realize that your website may no longer list it, but if you have advertised out to the public, often you can find listings about your production on other websites that listed it at the time, like Broadway World or whatever is applicable to you guys that has been catched. So you can submit that. There's 6 different categories so that you have an option. Advertisements, it's talking about ads that you have placed in newspapers and so forth, for your productions, things like that. Other than that, we're good to go, Terry. They're on top of it.
These are sharp cookies.
Yeah, they are.
Also, one of the questions that has come up is it does have to be open to the public and advertised. It is okay if your productions are free. You don't have to charge. So that is not an elimination. Okay, next. So as we talked about, there are some
wait.
questions. Oh,
So
whoop,
sorry. We
yes.
just got a question that actually has come up before, and I don't remember what answer we came up with. They pay a couple of employees through a loan out company, like often actors do as well. Can they be included in payroll expenses? I think I don't think that they can. I'm not sure, but I don't remember what we asked. Sometimes, for example, I've paid an actor through their own corporation.
I think if you don't have a W-2 for them, then we can't reimburse it. If there is a W-2 issued for the payment, then you can get them reimbursed. I will get a clarification on that from the state, but that I believe is where it has come down, is you have to be able to provide a W-2 for them. Not provide, but if asked. That's the line that you should draw for yourself. That if the state were come back to you and say, we need all your W-2s for these people, you could provide them.
We should
But
definitely, yeah, look that one up because it's somewhat of a common practice that actors or performers,
yes, and I know it's
especially ones
becoming
who have high
more common.
profiles, right?
Yes. So I will. Could you submit that as
Yes.
as an actual question,
Yeah.
and we'll get an answer from the state on that, because it is certainly a legitimate way
Yes.
to be paying people. It's totally legal. It's a complete payroll. So we will work and see if we can make that happen. Okay, so some of these questions again, it's not the answer, it's the fact that you answer for the next section of the application. I don't go through all of these here. They are all included in the program guide. So go through it because it's going to ask you questions like the number of employees in certain years, the number of contractors in certain years. I think it's 23, 24, and then projected to 25. Obviously, what the state wants to be able to do is say, here are taxpayer dollars, and look at the growth we provided because of these funds. So as you go through the questions, understand it's about justifying the dollars, and it's also part of the advocacy for future funding. We've tried very hard not to ask anything that is not 100% required, but I do know there's some details, like one of the questions is the percentage of your budget that was spent on employee expenses. So look at them, be prepared for them, understand that they don't impact your eligibility. We're not going to give money first to people who, have more employees than others. It's all about the reporting. So your eligibility is impacted if you don't answer the questions, but the actual answers don't impact your eligibility. Next. Okay, at the very end, you're going to sign a certificate of compliance. This is going to be initialed and signed by your authorized signatory. There are a bunch of statements in here that this person has to attest to on a legal document, such as, are you in compliance with California labor law? The statements about your certificate, your sexual harassment training. You also, one of the requirements is that since this legislation passed in 2023, you have not had any judgments against you regarding worker classification. Take these statements seriously. This is a legal document. If the state determines that you have made any false statements here, they can come back and take the money back and potentially enact other penalties. We cannot tell you whether or not you are in compliance. We very strongly recommend that you work with your whoever your board is advised by, around employment law and classify that. But we can't answer the question for you legally. That's not our purview or our expertise to say yes, you are in compliance. There are two different certificates. One for 501c3s. There's a separate one for fiscal sponsors that requires a signature from both the sponsor and the sponsee. The certificate for the 501c3s is prepared now. The fiscal sponsor certificate will be available soon. It will certainly be available before the portal opens. This is again something that you can prepare now, save on your hard drive, and be ready just to upload. Next. Yay, we're at the end. You have submitted your application. Life is happy. You're doing the dance of joy in your office. You should get a confirmation email. If you don't get a confirmation email saying, woot woot, you submitted your application, go back into the portal and make sure it says that you submitted. If it doesn't, or if it says and you didn't get an email, email the PAEPF at californiansforthearts.org email and say, hey, I didn't get my confirmation email. Because if you don't get it now, then you might not get it later when we're trying to contact you. Or if you think the grant has submitted and it didn't really, that's why you didn't, contact us and check it out. We'd rather you check it out and we say everything's fine than have your grant be sitting in limbo for 3 weeks and you falling behind in line. So please, please, please watch for that email. If you don't have one in 15 minutes, contact us and say, hey, what's up? Then continue to monitor that email because we may contact you throughout the process. And you want to get back to us as soon as possible. Keep an eye on your spam filter as always. Next. Resources. We have tried to compile and offer up for you as many resources as we possibly can. So let's go over on some of those. Some of those are here today. Some of them are in the links document, and some of them are in the program guide. Next. Okay, first of all, the program guide has all the applications. I like to think of this as your study guide. Go in, answer the questions, collect the documents, make yourself a folder on your hard drive that's got all your PDFs. I would highly recommend you create all your PDFs, give them to someone else to look at on a different computer. Every once in a while with PDFs, they work just fine on the computer they were created on, but then you move them over someplace else and suddenly they're tiny or blurry or whatever. Do everything you can to make sure that what you submit is as easy for reviewers to go through as possible. They're going to be going through a lot of these, and you want them to be able to do it as smoothly and with as few questions as possible. The friend that used to say about resumes, you don't want to be the one that makes people go, oh my God. Okay, you don't want to submit the application that makes the reviewers go, oh my God. Okay, there's some other suggestions there. Reach out to the PAEPF at California for the Arts with questions. You can also set up an office hour appointment. I think there has been some issue with the Calendly thing. You can also just email Martha at the PAEPF and ask to set up an appointment. I will say, I'm not trying to discourage people from doing appointments at all, but I highly, highly encourage you and recommend that questions that you have specifically about the application, about the process, you submit by email because then you have an answer by email. Very easy in a spoken conversation for there to be confusion, for you to think the person has said one thing, for you to misremember, for etc. So I really encourage you to do it by email so there is a record, so you have something to refer back to. Go set up your GoSmart portal. Make sure that you double check the authorized signer on your statement of information. You don't want to run into that surprise on the morning that you're applying, or as we had a lot with the relief grants, have you signed someone assuming they're the authorized signer, and when it gets checked at the state level, that person is not on your statement of information. Okay. One other thing that is extremely, extremely important that we hope you will do is tell all the other potentially eligible organizations that you know of to apply. As we've said, part of the advocacy for future funding is that we get a really big response to this when it opens. We all know there was a lot of great relief money that happened during the COVID crisis. The reality is every one of those funds ended up being undersubscribed. And that has left the impression in many legislators' minds that we ask for more money than we need, and that the need within the arts is not that severe. We absolutely want this fund to run out of money. We want it to be subscribed, fully subscribed and oversubscribed with a wait list, because that gives us the most powerful message we have to take back to legislators and say, we need more money. So help us spread the word. Next, the tips portal, go and learn about the Go Smart portal. Next, this is the website where you're going to go check out your status. You'll see the little thing at the top where it says request certificate. It's $5. You click on the thing, they send it to you. It's lovely. Next, use a valid email address. Next, ask for help. As we've talked about, reach out, ask for questions, share your concerns. Next, first, before I say this, Beatrice, are there any questions? I'm sorry, I'm behind today because of our snafus.
No, well, I just because I'd like to be able to answer accurately. I was asked if the GoSmart portal is the same portal that was used by Cal OSBA in the COVID grants.
No.
And I said no. Okay.
No. No, that was that was a Salesforce-based portal. This is a completely separate, different portal. We'll know in a while if it's better or worse. We think it's better. Yeah. So, Dan, I would be remiss not to remind you to please consider membership in either Californians for the Arts or Californians Arts Advocates. We are service organizations, and we are dependent upon donations and memberships to be able to provide services and advocacy that we do throughout the year. I would extend that to also encourage you to consider membership if you are not already in ACSO. Having organizations like these to be a collective voice is incredibly powerful and useful. Next, two other opportunities that I would encourage you to look at is in April on the 22nd in Sacramento, we have the California Arts and Culture Summit, which is a fun day of networking and information and both speakers and breakouts with artists, culture workers, administrators from all genres across the state. And then the next day on April 23rd, we have Arts Advocacy Day, which is a free day. We start in Capitol Park in Sacramento. We have a fun rally with speakers and performers. And then en masse, we all go for scheduled appointments with legislators. This is an extremely powerful way to demonstrate to your legislators the importance of arts funding. There's talking points prepared, there are meetings organized, but the impact of having 10 to 15 people show up for a scheduled meeting in their office to tell them specifically how the arts impact their district is a very, very powerful message. If you have not done a lot of direct advocacy like this, it's also a great introduction to it. So come and join us and have fun in Sacramento in April. Next, thank you. Thank you for your advocacy. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you to my team. Thank you to our friends at ACSO. Thank you for being here for today. And thank you for applying. And I look forward to a couple of months down the line when I'm hearing all kinds of wonderful stories of success. Beatrice, do you have any parting bits of wisdom?
It's funny because the person who asked us said they were having a brain fever, and I think I am too. I'm not seeing all of a sudden on the links document the website for the Secretary of State where you can download the certificate.
It's there.
If it's not in the links document, it is 100% in the guidelines, and I will confirm that it is there before I send out the follow-up email.
I'm sure it's there because I've seen it before, but today I'm not.
It is there. Certificate of compliance for 501c3 applicants. Yeah.
That's not what they're asking.
Oh, I'm sorry. The one on
the Secretary of State. It's okay. Let's keep going because we're running out of time. I will make sure it's there before we send it out.
Thank you.
Next, anything else? Any other questions? Any other words of wisdom?
Very quickly, I just want to reiterate what Terry said about using the PAEPF email to send in questions. I love talking to people, as anyone who knows me will tell you, but it's more effective if you send in those written questions, because if it's a tricky one, I can copy my colleagues so that you're not just getting my wisdom, but you're getting everyone weighing in. And this has actually helped us build a much stronger consensus around the more tricky questions of this application, which will serve everyone. So that's a recommendation. Also, please apply. One of the things that Cal OSBA said very early on at a meeting where Sarah was in attendance was, well, you know, if it gets oversubscribed and there are more people waiting, we can always go to the legislature and tell them they underfunded the program. And sometimes things happen. So that came from Cal OSBA, and it would be great to get everybody funded, but we can only have a chance to do that if everyone applies.
The one thing that I will say that we haven't talked about as much today is the reminder that, again, this is a brand new program. And so there may be some questions that you ask that we have to go back to the state and get clarification on, because not everything has been figured out yet. And sometimes people have very unique situations. And so give them to us, especially if you do think there's something unique or strange about your application. Ask now, don't submit and then hope. It's fine to go ahead and submit. It's just if you can give us some heads up on your unique situation, then we can start to do research and see if we can help you beforehand. We cannot, in any situation, give you an absolute answer beforehand if you will be eligible. We do not have the power. We do not have the right. We cannot answer that question until we have your full package. The one other thing that I think I forgot to say is, in preparing any of your documents, if you think there is something weird that needs explanation, put a note in with your PDF and just say, I realize this says X and that seems strange, but here's why. You're going to do that with your calculations. Also, the last question on the application is going to be, is there anything else you think we should know? Use that. This is not a place to plea if you think you're not eligible. This is about, our organization started 1,400 years ago, and it was called the School for Dance. We're not actually a school, we're performance. We've just never changed our legal name. There are things like that that go on. So use it to share with us your information or issues. Sarah, do you have anything you would like to say in parting? I know we're over by a minute. Sorry, everyone.
We're over by a minute, so I'll just say I'm so grateful for the music community. I'm so grateful for your orchestras. You deserve to have your work supported in this way. So please, I know it's a lot. I know it's a lot of gathering of information and documentation, but it's worth it if you get this grant. And then you'll always already have that documentation gathered, which is handy to have anyway. So just go for it. Don't get discouraged. And Californians for the Arts has been an amazing. They have experience providing technical support with very complicated grants. COVID really built that muscle memory for them. So they're an amazing group of folks to help with technical support should you need it. So also don't hesitate to reach out. So don't get discouraged and give up. Do your best and go for it.
Yes, and I think that is great. That is great advice. If you think, I think I'm eligible, but I'm not sure, apply. Err on the side of applying.
Yes.
Beatrice, were you starting to say
Does anybody
something?
know where the saved chat goes on people's computers? I don't know.
There's a Zoom. You have a Zoom folder.
That's what I thought. Okay, so that's
Find
what
your
I said.
Zoom folder, and it will have, excuse me, a folder for it with today's date.
So search for Zoom. That's what I said, a Zoom directory somewhere, but yeah.
Yeah. There is. I don't know Mac. I'm only a PC girl, but I know on PCs there's a folder that says Zoom.
In Mac as well. I'm a Mac girl, so there you go.
Okay, there you go. We cover all the bases here. Okay. Anything else, Beatrice, that's come in here at the end?
No, I know we're over time. I've had so many people reach out. Do you think there's any chance for future for youth orchestras? Folks, come up and see us on Advocacy Day and say hi to me, and we'll go and talk to people together. So that's the answer. Yes, there's always, nobody thought there was a chance for this to pass, and it did. So the chance is as big as we make it, and we just have to work.
Exactly. And having this these funds be fully used and then a big list of other people standing, nothing is going to send a stronger message to legislators of the impact of these monies. And then to follow up, if you get funded, to send a letter, to go to meet with your legislator and say, oh my God, you have no idea how important this was and what a difference it's made for our organization and how desperately we need you to fund this again and expand it to our colleagues. I'm very grateful for all of you being here. For those of you who are thanking us in the chat, I'm grateful that the information was helpful. I apologize again for the technology snafu in the middle. And I feel like it kind of threw me off. I don't feel like you got the best performance today. But please follow up with any questions.
Good questions.
Yes, thank you for being here. Thank you for your advocacy and your involvement. And this is not an easy industry, excuse me, to work in right now. Excuse me, I suddenly desperately need water. And I applaud all of you who are continuing to fight the good fight. So on that, thank you. Have a fabulous day. Get your applications in and then send us wonderful stories of success. Thank you all. Bye-bye.